G'day guys, Aussie Bloke here. Hope you're all doing well. So on the last episode, we were talking about two forms of the verb to be, estar and ser. On this episode, we'll be shifting our focus to three different but very important verbs. We'll be looking at the verbs for to be able to, which is poder, to have, tener, and to do or to make, which is hacer. Just focusing on the verb to be able to for now, or in Spanish, as I mentioned before, is poder, P-O-D-E-R. Basically, when you're looking at the verb poder, it behaves quite differently to most of the other verbs that end in ER. So I'll just quickly run through what that is for the various pronouns. And basically, what you do with the verb poder is that unless you're talking about we can do something, for all the other forms of the verb, I can, you can, they can, etc., the O just basically caves in and it gets turned into UE. So what do I mean by this? So, for example, I can, when you look at that, it instead of being like puedo, it is puedo, P-U-E-D-O, puedo. And if you want to say you can, then that's puedes, P-U-E-D-E-S, puedes. They can is pueden, P-U-E-D-E-N. He, she, or it, the entity, can is puede, P-U-E-D-E. And we can just behaves as all the other verbs in that the R drops off the end and that just is replaced by a mos. So we can is just podemos. So having said all that, let's just run through a few quick examples. If you wanted to say, for example, I can and you can, how would you say that? Puedo y puedes. Puedo y puedes. And if you wanted to say we can and they can, podemos y pueden. Podemos y pueden. And if you wanted to say they can and I can, but you can't, pueden y puedo, pero no puedes. Pueden y puedo, pero no puedes. And for this last example, we'll just need one more word, and that's for dog, which in Spanish is perro, P-R-R-O. Just a quick note, when you have to do the double R's in Spanish, you need to roll it. So again, dog is perro, P-R-R-O. Having said that, how would you say, the dog can't, but we can? El perro no puede, pero podemos. El perro no puede, pero podemos. So just shifting our focus to the verb for to do or to make, which as mentioned before is hacer, H-A-C-E-R. That verb behaves in pretty well the same way as most of the other verbs that end in ER, with the exception of I do or I make, which instead of being haso, if you were going to follow the rules for most of the other verbs, instead it's hago, H-A-G-O, hago. But all the other forms of the verb follow the same rules. So having said all that, if you wanted to say you make, how would you say that? Haces. Haces. If you wanted to say they make or do, hacen. Hacen. And if you wanted to say he, she, or it, the entity makes, hace. Hace. And if you wanted to say we make or we do, hacemos. Hacemos. And now just shifting our focus to the verb for to have, which as mentioned before is tener, T-E-N-E-R. That verb does behave quite differently to most of the other verbs that end in ER. So I'll just quickly run through what those are for the various pronouns. And basically, unless you're saying I have or we have, what happens is the first E that comes after the T switches to an IE. So for example, if you wanted to say you have, rather than being tienes, it'll be tienes, tienes. And if you want to say they have, the same thing happens. The first E switches to an IE, and then there's an N on the end, so it's tienen, tienen. And he, she, or it, the entity has, is tiene, tiene. The I have is a little bit different, and that is tengo, T-E-N-G-O, tengo, and the we have is tenemos, tenemos. Just to expand on the verb tener, I'd like to bring in how you say to have to. In Spanish, when you have to say you have to and you want to add that to just specifically after the have to, then it's que rather than are. So to have to is tener que. So for example, if you wanted to say you have to do it, then that's tienes que hacerlo. So after the you have to, when you add on the do it, you just add on the to form of the verb, and the it is just added on to the end. So again, you have to do it is just tienes que hacerlo. And if you wanted to say they have to do it, then that's tienen que hacerlo. Tienen que hacerlo. Now just run through a few more examples of those. So if you wanted to say we have to do it, how would you say that? Tenemos que hacerlo. Tenemos que hacerlo. And if you want to say I have to do it, tengo que hacerlo. Tengo que hacerlo. And he has to do it, tiene que hacerlo. Tiene que hacerlo. Or él tiene que hacerlo. Now, if you want to say we have to believe it, so again, the word for believe is creer, C-R-E-E-R. So if you want to say you have to believe it, tienes que creerlo. Tienes que creerlo. And they have to believe it, tienen que creerlo. Tienen que creerlo. And we have to believe it, tenemos que creerlo. Tenemos que creerlo. And I have to believe it, tengo que creerlo. Tengo que creerlo. And she has to believe it, tiene que creerlo. Tiene que creerlo. Or ella tiene que creerlo. Ella tiene que creerlo. So now just a few examples using the verb to look, or in Spanish is mirar, M-I-R-A-R. If you wanted to say you have to look, how would you say that? Tienes que mirar. Tienes que mirar. Or they have to look, tienen que mirar. Tienen que mirar. Or we have to look, tenemos que mirar. Tenemos que mirar. Alright guys, that's all for today. Hope that was straightforward enough, and we'll catch you on the next one.